Okay, so this is my third time. Oh boy, technology. I'm assuming you know the vocabulary. We have the passive verbs here bolded for you, but I am not going to bother with vocab. I'm going to assume you know it. You can get it like either through Latin lexicon or Whitaker's Words, which is a little more complicated. I am going to bring up Whitaker's Words for strepuerant, but you should have that in your notebook. DU, I know that word as for a long time. However, I have heard in class that it came up as all day. Both of those are cool. What they are temporal adverbs. They're going to tell you something about the time of your verb. Okay, so for a long time or a long all day. That NT is telling me I should be looking for a nominative, and there it is. This sentence is constructed in perfect Roman grammar. You've got your subject first and your verb last in your clause. In English, we don't have that order, right? So your main task as a translator is getting your verb, the last element in a Latin clause usually, up to be the second element in the English clause. So you do subject, verb in English, and then deal with all the stuff afterwards. That's the best way to go. So the Romani manebaten, right? The Romans were waiting, were remaining, were staying. You can do that were ing if you see the imperfect BA. To me, it sounds better here, though, if I just do the simple past. So all day the Romans remained, or for a long time the Romans stayed in Monte. Now this is an ablative. Mons montis is a third declension. In here you want to translate as on, something that indicates stasis. It's not moving, it's not crossing borders or going up or down, it's on. On the mountain. So all day the Romans remained on the mountain. Finally, mons, all right, there it is in its nominative form. Ascinda est, right? So when I see a verb to be at the end of the sentence, I need to do a double check. If the word in front of it is a perfect passive participle, which ascinda here is, and I'm going to talk about this D in just a second. If I see a form of sum next to a perfect passive participle, I got a perfect passive verb. I've got a verb that's passive, and it's in either the perfect, the pluperfect, or the future perfect, right? And you use the tense of your form of to be to indicate which of those other three tenses you're in. For example, here we have a present tense of to be. That paired with a perfect passive participle puts you in the perfect tense. Your helping verbs are going to be have been verbed, he has been verbed, or you can do the simple he was verbed or they were verbed. Okay, both of those are acceptable for the perfect passive in Latin. If it's an errant, like down here, this is the imperfect form of sum. That puts you into the pluperfect tense. And there you want to make sure you have your helping verb as had been verbed. Okay, that's the formula for the pluperfect. Now let's say I had a future form of sum here, something like that would be errant all by itself, not attached to another verb, but errant. If I have that plus a perfect passive participle, I'm looking at the future perfect passive, which we will translate as will have been verbed. Okay, it's something that will happen passively in the future to the subject. We don't have that in this paragraph, but you'll see it certainly on tests. All right. Finally, the mountain ascinda est. Now this perfect passive participle is pretty unique because it doesn't have a T. About 90% of your perfect passive participles have a T before the variable adjective ending. It'll be either masculine, feminine, or neuter based on the gender of the subject of that perfect passive verb, right? Here, mons is feminine, so I got an A. But most of your perfect passive participles will have a T here. About 5 to 10% will have an S or an SS, and then you've got like an X and a D that shows up there. If you can actually follow this for a second longer, a D and a T, your tongue and the sound you make there are pretty close. We call them a dental explosive, a T. If you put your tongue up right at the top of your teeth, your dentes, and make a little pop sound, you make a T. A D is not as explosive, but your tongue's pretty much in the same position. What I'm trying to say is if you can hear a D and a T similarly, then Askinda is not too far afield from what we see down here with auditi. See, they got that T, or your standard amo, amari, amawi, amatus, right? That T is super duper common. And in German languages like English and German languages like German, we actually do in English, this D is, it comes out as D. The T is a D in English, like we walked, we talked, right? All of that stuff, that D is related to this T, and it comes out as a D in Askinda Est. Back to the story. Finally, the mountain was climbed, or has been climbed. That sounds super clunky. The mountain was scaled. Ah, gollies. Now, normally, if you do a Whitaker's Words or you look up your your first word you're going to get for generally is going to be from. However, if you have a passive form of a verb, and especially if you have a human or some kind of living thing behind it, that's generally going to be your ablative of agent, right? The agent that is doing the passive verb. Because you don't know who climbed the mountain unless you have a clause by the Gauls, right? So finally, the mountain was climbed by the Gauls. Yes, I know both of those are nominative plurals, so I'm anticipating, and there it is, an NT on my verb. So, milites Romani, the Roman soldiers, errant. That's clear. Oh, and this is even super clearer. If I've got a V in front of an errant, there ain't nothing but the perfect tense happening here. So, perfect tense, has or have, depending on singular or plural, third person. Here it's have heard, right? The Roman soldiers have heard. That's a little too much for me. It's okay, but I go simple past there too. The Roman soldiers heard. Oh, they non-heard them. The Roman soldiers did not hear. That sounds much better than have not heard. The Roman soldiers did not hear eos. That os, that's an accusative plural, right? And it's from is, ea, id. It's from is, he. But in the accusative plural, he becomes them, right? So the Roman soldiers did not hear them, or have not heard them. Said, in capitilio. Now this, when I see in plus an ablative, I'm looking at ablative of place where, right? But on the Capitol Hill, or on Capitol Hill, or on Mount Capitol, there's a variety of ways to translate that word we saw in the earlier translations. But on Capitol Hill, Jupiter, that's Jupiter's nominative. You know that is Juno's nominative. And Minerva, I'm assuming she's nominative too. Oh, look at that. I got an NT on my verb. So all three of these gods, goddesses, are my subject, right? But on Capitol Hill, or on the Mount Capitol, Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva habebant. So you could say they were having, but that sounds super duper clunky. I'm just going to do it as the simple past. They had. They had. So Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva had templa. So we know that templum is the nominative singular, so that A there is a short A, but it is indicating accusative plural, the direct object of had, right? So Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva had temples on Capitol Mountain, on the Capitol. And in templo, another accusative of place where, ablative of place where, and in the temple, Junonis, that is is genitive, in the temple of Juno, errant, that's the imperfect of sum, NT is going to be there were ansere sacri. Both of these are nominative plural endings, so they're the subject of there were sacred geese. Okay? Ansere sacri, they stay the nominative. There's my NT. Oh, look at that. I've got errant behind a V. I know I'm in the perfect tense. So the sacred geese heard. You could say have heard, because remember, has or have for the perfect. And then the gallos, that accusative plural is telling you that's the direct object, what is receiving the action of hearing, right? So the sacred geese heard the Gauls. Et illi streperunt. Ooh, I see that erunt there, but check this out. I've got a U in front of it. Now, again, to blah blah about how our alphabet has changed over time and the T and the D are the same, this V and the U for the Romans really were the same letter. The V and the U separated about 400 or 500 years after Rome was kind of on the downcline. So this V and this U, if it's in front of an erunt, it's a perfect tense indicator. So the sacred geese have heard the Gauls, and they, right? That's a nominative plural, masculine, going with our sacred geese. I don't know what streperunt means. Strepeo, what does it mean? To make a noise, ruckus. So I go to here's my Whitaker's words, make a loud noise, to shout confusedly, right? So that's what I'm going to put back in here. The sacred geese heard the Gauls and they made a loud noise. Amanlio, oh look, I got a passive verb, so this is another ablative of agent. By Manlius, Anceras, the geese, erant. Erant's telling me I'm going to do auditi erant in the pluperfect passive. And there my helping verb is had been verbed, right? So let's take it from the top. Here's my nominative. The geese had been heard. Now see how I've got an I on that auditi? That's agreeing with the nominative plural masculine anceres, right? So in the perfect passive system, that last letter is going to be variable based on the gender and number of the subject of it, right? So it really is kind of an adjective even though it's working in a verb structure. So the geese had been heard by Manlius. Now my ablative of agent up front makes sense. And, that means and, stat. And immediately, I got an accusative and I got an accusative, got to hold off. Oh, here's my verb. I got a T meaning Manlius, meaning he, right? So the geese had been heard by Manlius, and he wokawit. I got that V, so it's perfect here. He called the Keteros Romanos, the other Romans, right? Ketera means other, like the English, we hear it in English all the times, etc., right? That's from and other things. But here with the OS on it, it's agreeing with Romans, so we just say, the geese had been heard by Manlius, and he called the other Romans. All right, hopefully that'll take this time, and I'll move on to the last paragraph, and we'll be done.